This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast, the show that unpacks fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Harrison Zuckerberg, and we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while also finding meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. We won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing as we provide fantasy advice and biblical encouragement. I'm coming to you from the Unpacking It Ministries studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm repping the brand new Unpacking It hats that were released yesterday at the Unpacking It golf tournament, and we had an awesome day here in Charlotte. It was beautiful. God was very kind with the weather, and we had around 130 golfers come and play and support our ministry. And Fantasy Football Fellowship, of course, is a part of that. And so I'm a little worn out from yesterday. A lot of fun, but man, we've got a lot of fantasy talk to get to today as we're right in that middle of the season, fighting for playoff spots, and so a lot of things happening in fantasy. And I will say this: I had a big fantasy weekend. I was getting ready for the golf tournament, and I'm looking over at the TV, and my guys are scoring left and right, and you won't believe who those guys are and what team actually did wonderfully for me this weekend. So I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. We'll go over waiver wire. We will do some bandwagon riding, some fantasy shenanigans, and we'll begin with the fantasy breakout. But before I do that, I do want to thank our sponsor, Sugar Creek Coffee. We love Sugar Creek Coffee. They were out at the golf tournament yesterday, and so they're a big supporter of this ministry. And you can go to sugarcreekcoffee.com. Use the promo code UNPACK, and you can save some money on coffee, and they will deliver it to your door. And so it's fantastic. It's great. Great getting coffee at your door. It's fresh, it's delicious, and you'll enjoy it. So we appreciate them. Also, I encourage you to check out the Unpacking It raffle that we are doing. For the next 2 weeks, this was released in the last day or two, and it is sports experiences, sports memorabilia. And what you do is you buy a raffle ticket, $25, $50, $100 or more, and you get a certain amount of entries into whatever prize you want. So if you're a Cowboys fan, check it out. If you're an Eagles fan, check it out. If you're a Seahawks fan, check it out. If you're a NASCAR fan, we got some cool stuff. So we'll put the link in social media and also in the podcast show notes. And so you can click on that on YouTube as well. So anyway, check that out. Check out the raffle. Support the ministry. This is going to be taking place for the next 2 weeks. So we really appreciate the support there. It allows us to do what we do here at Unpacking It and here with Fantasy Football Fellowship. All right, let's jump into this week's Fantasy Breakout, where we take a fantasy concept, we relate it to the Bible, we relate it to life. And so today, I want to talk about our lineups. And this is the heart of fantasy. Week in, week out, as fantasy managers, the most important thing we do is set our starting lineup. And I'm not talking about best ball today. I'm in a best ball league too, and you draft a team and you leave it. But the season long lineup changing leagues, week in, week out, we have choices to make. And especially coming off of last week where lots of guys were on buys. We're always dealing with injuries. That's a season-long issue for all of us. And every week, we oftentimes face these dilemmas. We are, maybe we'll take the running back position. That's my favorite position. So the running back position, some weeks, it's like, okay, do I go with the guy that played better last week, but then this week has a really tough matchup? They're going up against a good defense. Or the running back who's coming off a tough week, but has a really running back friendly week? Do I play the guy that's somewhat injured, but is better overall, or the guy that's healthy, but maybe not quite as strong of a running back? So those types of decisions go back and forth. And a few weeks ago, I talked about questionable players. You throw that into the mix with this conversation too. And here's what happens. We're stressed. We're stressed when we are trying to make our lineup decisions. And we start to sense the pressure that pops up as, all right, I got to make the right choice. I got to get the right guy in. Well, and then we start playing the what if game. Well, what if this guy gets injured? Or what if they play the backup running back a little bit more? Or what if the offensive coordinator decides that they're going to pass the ball more because they're going up against a good defense? And so all these things are swirling around in our head. We're asking questions. We're looking at our lineup. We're going back and forth. We're like, okay, do I go with this running back or this running back? This wide receiver or that wide receiver? Do I put him in my flex? And then, okay, maybe I'll throw in a second tight end because I'm good at tight end. And we end up worrying. We end up getting a little anxious. We get a little stressed. We feel the pressure. We're concerned about making the right choice. And all right, what do we do this week? And then as the season goes along, the pressure intensifies and we're fighting for a playoff spot. And then once the playoffs begin, oh boy, then the real stress comes in, right? We don't want to make that wrong choice because we don't want to see our, the running back that we chose not to put in the starting lineup go off on our bench and have a huge performance. So then that worry starts to set in. We go, oh no, if I put this guy in the bench and he goes off, I'm going to be so upset. And so these are the emotions of fantasy managers. And so I'm right there with you. This is what we do. And so, throughout our going on in our mind, we're like, man, what should I do? And we want to have an awesome lineup. We don't want to make mistakes. And the reality is we can't predict the future or control the outcomes. So we have to accept this as fantasy managers, that's the harsh reality. And so, each fantasy, opportunity, or each week as we set our lineup, is an opportunity for us to win, to move up in the standings, to beat our friends. And so we carry this weight as fantasy managers to pick the best lineup. And of course, this is part of the deal. It's what makes it competitive. In some ways, it makes it fun. But what do we do with all this stress and fantasy anxiety? Well, we've got to try to relax and be confident and at peace that, all right, this decision is the best I can make with the information that I have. And we also have to remember that we can't control what the players do out on the field. And we just need to get our lineup set and not let the process cause us to be overly worried, right? And so we just can't get so worked up about our weekly lineup that it takes away the joy of playing fantasy football. And so I bring all of this up today to start the show because if you're like me, the battle against worry and stress and pressure is a daily occurrence. And every day we have a choice to give into the anxiousness, the stress, the concern, the what ifs, or are we going to live in peace? Are we going to live in confidence? And so how do we do that? Well, we've got to trust the Lord. We have to rely on the Lord every day and surrender to him and say, here's what I'm worried about. Here are my concerns. Lord, take them. Please give me your peace, because we can't manufacture peace on our own. It's a deep, really spiritual issue that we either are placing our hope, our faith, our trust in Jesus, or we're allowing the circumstances, the decisions that we have in front of us, the worries, the what ifs, all of that's going on in our minds and hearts and all around us. Are we going to let that win? And we're analyzing everything in our lives, or are we confidently trusting the Lord and saying, God, I need your peace. You are peace. And I know that you offer me peace. And so I'm going to you for peace so that I can walk with you and in your peace today and not allow all these other things to derail me and take me down. So let's go right to scripture. Philippians 4:6-7. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. That is a powerful verse. Maybe you've heard it before, but it's one of those verses that we probably should read every single day. It's that important. And it's not, hey, try not to worry. It's no, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. So as the worry starts to come, the decisions in front of us, those lineup decisions in life, so to speak, that are causing us stress, are we worried about it or are we praying about it? And are we experiencing this peace that exceeds anything we can understand? That's what's available to us from the God of the universe, our heavenly Father, our personal Savior, our personal Lord. And so that's what we can tap into, the peace of God. And so as followers of Jesus, that's what we have the opportunity to experience. And so in Isaiah 26:3, this is the Amplified, it says, you will keep in perfect peace, or perfect and constant peace, the one whose mind is steadfast, that is committed and focused on you in both inclination and character, because he trusts and takes refuge in you with hope and confident expectation. And so, is our mind on him and steadfast, committed, focused on him, or is it focused on the circumstances and we're so worried about the things that we can't control and we're worried about outcomes versus fixing our eyes on him and trusting him and saying, God, show me the way. I trust you. I don't know what's going to happen. This is the information in front of me. I'm going to make the wisest decision as you lead, as your spirit guides. I'm trusting you, and I'm going to have peace in that. I'm going to have peace in knowing that you are in control, that you are good, that you are faithful. And so we have peace in him, the character of God, the power of God. And so in Psalm 34:4, it says, I prayed to the Lord and he answered me. He freed me from all my fears. And so let's go to him in prayer. And then Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So we delight in him. As we delight in him, our heart changes. We're more aligned with him. And as we're aligned with him and we're walking with him, we're going to experience peace that surpasses understanding, that exceeds our understanding. And so I hope that is encouraging to you today with whatever you're battling with, because I'm right there with you. But we have a choice. We have a choice to give into the worry and allow it to take over, or go to him and fix our eyes on him and experience that peace. So when it comes to fantasy, we got to let it go. We got to put our lineup in and let it go and do the best that we can and enjoy the process of the weekly lineup decisions. And so I will begin as we welcome on Harrison Zuckerberg. Harrison, I've told you all year long about one of my teams that has struggled. I've dealt with injuries. It's the league that we have a ring at the end of the season for the winner. And I went into last week as the last place team. However, I put together a starting lineup that consisted of Derek Carr, Josh Downs, Josh Palmer, Deontay Foreman, Jahmyr Gibbs, Darren Waller, and I absolutely dominated. It was tremendous. I'm back. Here we go. I worked the waiver wire. Jacoby Myers is the other one. And that was my starting lineup. And so for those of you today that you've been struggling with your starting lineup, you've been dealing with injuries, do not give up. Keep working the waiver wire. Keep listening to this show. I am with you. I am helping you. Hopefully you have listened over the last few weeks. There are still talented players week in, week out that you can snag on that waiver wire that can help you win games. You don't always have to do it with the superstars, but you've got to work that lineup. You got to manage your roster all season long. So Harrison, I had to get that off my chest. I'm so excited. I came off the weekend. It was a big win for me. I beat my biggest rival in my fantasy league. I called and left him a very friendly message yesterday and ended up having a wonderful conversation. But there you go. Harrison, how you doing, man? How you feeling coming off the weekend?
I am doing great. I agree with you. I did not think this was going to be a big week for me in fantasy because I was devastated by injuries and bye weeks. This was a really big bye week. We had the Cowboys, the Bengals, the Texans. I never thought I'd be concerned about the Texans bye week, but here we are because Nico Collins has been so great this year. Tank Dell has been so great. So I also threw together a couple crazy lineups, and I was carried by Gus Edwards, Donta Foreman, and Jordan Addison to multiple wins this week. It was the guys who you just had to throw in last minute and be like, you know what? I've got to start someone. Darrell Henderson, I picked up, at 10 a.m. the day before the game started when it turned out he was going to be the starter for the Rams and not Zach Evans. He had a big week. Jacoby Myers has been fantastic this entire season, once again scoring more than 15 points, something that he's done in every week but one so far this season. He's the wide receiver 12 on the year, which is unbelievable to think that he is the wide receiver 12 on the same team as Devontae Adams. Um,
Yes.
and most importantly for me, James Cook with a huge bounce back week scores 19 points, more than he had, double what he had pretty much the last 2 weeks before that. So that was a huge vote of confidence for him. And yeah, it feels really good when the guys who you don't really think you can count on end up showing up for you and leading your team, especially when guys like Cooper Kupp disappeared this week and we didn't see anything from them.
It is a week to week adventure. That's what this is. And so it's all about understanding matchups and realizing, hey, where there is opportunity. So in Chicago, Deontay Foreman had opportunity. Now, here's the reality. Next week he might not do anything. And so that's what we're navigating. And so as excited as I am for that 30-point performance, I can't necessarily expect that the rest of the way. And so that's why this sets up our favorite segment.
Fantasy shenanigans.
And so we continue this conversation just about the shenanigans of the latest fantasy week as we try to understand what's going on and how this projects moving forward. And so I think Chicago is one of those crazy teams. I'm in a league where somebody dropped your boy Fields, Justin Fields, and so will he come back this year? What is that going to look like? So a lot of these, kind of teams, you throw Denver in the mix. Like, what are they going to be as the season goes on? How about last night? The Minnesota Vikings upset the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan Addison puts together one of the great wide receiver performances, which included leaving for a little while. And so that was an impressive performance, 29 points. And I have to confess that I was out on the Vikings. That was an impressive game last night. On Monday Night Football, we know Kirk and the big, primetime games. That was significant for him. Playing without Justin Jefferson, it looks like they've nailed another top pick at wide receiver. So anything else that's just kind of jumping out to you as we move forward, trying to navigate the shenanigans?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest shenanigans of the season, and we've been talking about it, is running backs and what to do with them. Because teams are now getting to their third and fourth string running backs on the rosters. Guys coming off of practice squads or who were sitting on the couch a week earlier, coming in and getting 20 touches and being productive. And it's like, okay, I know this is a good team, so you want to invest in options on a good team, especially running backs. But at what point does, the fifth string running back not become as valuable as the first string running back? Like, there's no way you could say that Kareem Hunt is going to be as good as Nick Chubb, or, Donta Foreman is going to be as good as Khalil Herbert, or Royce Freeman, who we haven't seen really play football in 3 years, is going to be as good as what we thought Kyron Williams and Cam Akers were going to be. But that just seems to be the case. If you are a NFL quality running back, if you're on a roster, you can score 25 plus points in fantasy any given week. So it's kind of infuriating, especially if you're someone who invested in running backs early, like Bijan Robinson, to, get duds from them, or Austin Eckler to get a complete dud from them. And then someone who just picks up a random guy off waivers ends up, outscoring both of your running backs.
Talk about shenanigans with the Chargers. I mean, that team is the epitome of shenanigans. I mean, what is going on? Come on, Chargers. I mean, Joshua Kelly earlier in the season had the opportunity to start, and I was all hyped about him. I hyped him up on this show, and he laid an egg for a couple weeks while Eckler was out. Then Eckler comes back. Well, week one, Eckler was healthy, and Kelly had a great day. Well, now Eckler comes back, and he gets banged up. He's got like an ankle injury. The offense isn't doing a ton, not to the level that we expect that offense to do, except for Joshua Palmer, which was nice. But then Eckler has a bad game, and then now Kelly had a big game in week 7. Some of this you can't predict, and that's the unpredictability of it all. But then the other thing is we just have to keep taking shots with these running backs. And that's why I always encourage you to load up your bench with running backs. You got to have them ready. And you throw them in, and some of those weeks it's just gonna work. And again, going back to the word opportunity, who's gonna have opportunity? And so that Chargers offense, they want to use Kelly and Eckler together. And then if Eckler is continuing to kind of battle through some injuries this season, which I'm afraid is going to be the case, Kelly's going to be relevant again. So keep him on your. I dropped him. I have to admit, I have to confess, I dropped him, but he'll be relevant, I think, a little bit more throughout the season. Last thing from shenanigans standpoint, tight ends. Wow, 11 tight ends in double figures this week. All of the premier tight ends delivered. I guess Hawkinson got banged up last night, but even he did fine. But all these guys on tight end holiday, whatever they created some day for themselves, but they all lived up to it. They lived up to the hype. What takeaway from the tight end position do you have?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway from the tight end position is once again, it is a significant advantage to draft a tight end early. We saw 36 points from Travis Kelce, 23 points from Darren Waller, 22 from Mark Andrews, 20 points from Hawkinson last night, even with him being banged up a little bit. And, you can grab a tight end off waivers and stream him, maybe get 7, 8 points, 11 if you're lucky. But having those 20-point weeks from your tight ends is so much of an advantage to other teams that, I mean, this just has to be the strategy every season. We can never doubt how early is too early to take a top tight end. We were wondering it a little bit for the first couple of weeks because, Andrews and Kelce were both banged up and not really performing. But you got to trust these guys. Like, they're top, 2, 3, even first round draft picks for a reason. You're taking them over elite wide receivers for a reason. They're going to produce.
Absolutely. And remember in the offseason, I was making the case taking Travis Kelce number 1 overall is not outrageous. And so I took him 3rd overall in the Unpacking It League, and I'm right up there in first place. So I'm loving life with Travis Kelce. And then, believe it or not, I actually made a mistake, and I took Darren Waller in like the 4th or 5th round. And I was like, oh, wait, I already had Kelce. And so I got caught up in the draft. But now Waller is coming on. And here's the shenanigans part of this. Tyrod Taylor is better than Daniel Jones. And we know this. Taylor has been a solid veteran quarterback for a number of years. He's probably not a franchise quarterback. He's never proven that you can hand over the reins to him because he's not elite. But he comes in, he can win games for you. He can get the offense moving enough. They didn't light it up by any means, but he knows how to get to the key players. And so we found Darren Waller. Finally, hello, we've got this talented tight end. Let's get him the ball. Let's get him in the end zone. Taylor understands to do that. So that was nice. So that was good to see. Because we've had to be patient with Waller. But here he is. He's emerging. And the Eagles offense, too, with Goddard, had to be patient with him a little bit. He's starting to get more involved, too. So the tight end position, and even Kelce or Kittle getting some love last night despite the loss. All right. Let's do a little bit of accountability and confession, and we can celebrate some of this as well. Some of the things here on the show, we like to talk about what we get right, what we get wrong, just kind of evaluate the things that we talk about here on the show so that you as a listener kind of have a pulse of what's going on. And so you heard me last week talk about in my I'm convinced statements that Jahmyr Gibbs would be a top 5 running back. Oh boy, he delivered for us 23 fantasy points, and the Lions were horrible. This was a outrageous game, yet Jahmyr Gibbs in the second half, they had to throw the ball, finally was getting involved in the passing game. 9 catches, incredible work for him. Finally got in the end zone. And I'm not worried with Montgomery coming back either. This is a 1-2 punch that Detroit wants to utilize. They finally unleashed Gibbs. He got the opportunity. He's healthy. And even though they stunk and laid an egg, they'll be fine. Detroit's legit. The Ravens just kind of caught him. It was one of those games. You throw it out every season. Every team has these games, even the elite teams. So that's a one for the Lions. You better not do it again, Lions. But thank you, Gibbs. Now, where was I wrong? James Cook. I was out on James Cook last week. Now, I'm not willing to say that I'm totally wrong, but he had a nice game. He got into the end zone. But the Bills still, what's going on with the Bills? They lost to New England. So can we trust them? Can we trust the running game? I don't think so. So I'll admit that, hey, all right, if you benched him or something and listened to me last week, I'm sorry. But I'm not willing to say, hey, he's going to carry you the rest of the way. I'm not willing to say that. But where were you wrong? Where were you right this past week?
So the biggest place that I was wrong was last week I said it would be smart to invest in Keontae Ingram, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals. And if you did that, yeah, you probably dropped someone you shouldn't have because he scored 0 points this week. and he should be right back on waivers. And there is no reason for him to be on a fantasy team, which fantasy shenanigans with that. 1 week it was DeMarcado, then it was not him. Now it's back to him again. Like, what's going on there
Avoid.
with the Cardinals? Yeah, this is just a
Avoid.
situation you have to avoid. There's value, but the odds that you guess right on who's going to produce that value week to week is just not worth it at all. And the biggest place that I was right, though, was I'm convinced last week that Rashee Rice was going to step up and become the wide receiver one for the Chiefs. We saw rumblings of it happening, but he officially did it this week. 17 points, 6 catches, got another touchdown. He's the go-to guy after Kelsey there. He should be started every single week. He should absolutely be on rosters every single week. The fact that he's still on waivers in some leagues is crazy to me. Go get him if you don't have him already, because he has the potential to be a legitimate league winner down the stretch towards the end of the season.
I agree. And I'm actually more confident in him than even Pacheco. Pacheco's doing well, and he's getting into the end zone, and he's a key part of that offense. But I think Rice is the key guy for fantasy purposes the rest of the way. Unless for some reason Kansas City pulled off another trade for a receiver and finally give up on Tony. That's possible. They've always got to be considered in the mix because they just traded for Hardman. They threw him out there, but he's not an elite guy. But Rice has the potential, so I'm with you on that. I will say I was wrong about Kendrick Bourne, at least for this past week. He's had a couple. He's been a boomer bust guy, basically. He's had a couple big weeks, and then he's been totally irrelevant. And I'm not sure that you can trust him enough to. I mean, maybe as a what the heck flex, as they say. But New England, I mean, I don't know what to make of them. I mean, it's such a bizarre team. It's a bizarre season. Apparently, Belichick signed an extension in the offseason. So the thought of him not returning, I don't know if that gets put to bed a little bit. And then the poor Bills. I mean, the Bills, New England's been in their way for so long, and here they are again, just making it tough on them. So, but good for Kendrick Bourne. I was a little off on that one. All right, let's do some bandwagon riding. We got a few things to discuss on the bandwagon. Here we go.
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off. Make up your mind, all right?
All right. So let's go back to Thursday Night Football, because this was an interesting fantasy game too. So you've got Jacksonville and New Orleans, two teams that at least I like both offenses. I think you did too, kind of heading into the season. Yeah, you liked Olave. Now he's in trouble. We'll see what happens there. But I want to start with the Jags wide receivers, because this has been a roller coaster ride, not just a bandwagon ride. This has been a roller coaster ride on who we trust. And the biggest name that we continue to kind of throw out there is Calvin Ridley. So are you officially off? Are you staying on? I mean, where do you stand with Calvin Ridley?
I mean, I was always on the Christian Kirk train. He was the one who I drafted over Ridley because I thought the value of him was better later. And I'm staying on the Christian Kirk train because he has been phenomenal. He is a wide receiver one. Ridley, I mean, if you expected him to be a wide receiver one this season, you're very disappointed. I don't know. I feel like he's someone you still have to start every week, at least in your flex, because he has that ability to go for a 50-yard touchdown or, have the 100-yard receiving game just off of big plays alone. But he is kind of game script dependent. So I don't know how much faith I would have in him to do that every week. So I honestly don't really know. Luckily, I don't have to make that decision because I don't have Calvin Ridley on any of my teams. That was something I thought I was going to be really disappointed about after week one.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm so mad I didn't get Calvin Ridley. But now it's kind of a blessing in disguise because I know I have Christian Kirk every single week and I don't have to worry about the boom or bust potential with Ridley.
So I'm more on the Kirk bandwagon for sure. Obviously, he's playing much better, and I will say I had to jump off the Zay Jones bandwagon. I was all excited. He got healthy for a game, and then he got injured again, so he's too unreliable. So I'm out on him. I'm still staying on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon. He ran the ball better, which was nice. So we thought the knee was a big concern. I ended up benching him this week. But I was pleased to see him rush for almost 60 yards to show, hey, my knee's all right. So good news there. Jags continue to win. So that's positive. So I'm staying on that bandwagon. The one thing, Travis Etienne, He's lighting it up. So we're on the bandwagon, no question about it. But here's the thing. With all these running backs like we've talked about, the injuries are likely. They're not inevitable, they're likely. And so be sure to have Tank Bigsby. I know he's not getting any carries. But he's the backup in Jacksonville. Jump on that bandwagon because Jacksonville is relying heavily on ETN. I do think they need to ease up a little bit and just put more on Trevor Lawrence, which could be good then for everybody else. You jump on everybody's bandwagon. So that's kind of where I come out on that. You mentioned earlier just some of the shenanigans with the Rams and the running backs. Let me be clear. I am off all Los Angeles Rams running backs. I do not want any of them. I don't want to play the McVay game. You knew how frustrated I was earlier in the year. We did What's Boiling Bryce about Cam Akers and that whole craziness. Are you kidding me? Darrell Henderson is still in the league. Royce Freeman is still in the league. And they got this rookie, Zach Evans, that they were hyping up, and I did pick him up, which was a mistake. What am I doing? Why did I do that? So I am off. I'm off the bandwagon. Get them out of here. Get them off my teams. I don't want any Rams running backs. Are you jumping on any of them?
I am on the Rams bandwagon, specifically Darrell Henderson, because I picked him up in pretty much every league, luckily, when it was announced that he would be the starter. Because I feel like if someone has a starting role on the Rams, they are going to score double-digit fantasy points. Doesn't matter if it's Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, wide receiver. I don't know who they would throw. Like Marshawn Lynch could come out of retirement and go on the Rams, and he would probably rush for 2 touchdowns and have like 75 yards next week if he wanted to. So if you are the starting running back for the Rams, I am starting you in my fantasy leagues. We don't know if it's going to be the same guy every single week, but as long as, hey, he's listed number 1 on the depth chart 30 minutes before the game starts, that guy is good to go and should be on your fantasy roster and in your starting lineup.
All right, good luck with that. Good luck. The Cardinals and the Rams, I do not want those backfields. I am out on those backfields. Same with Tampa Bay. Get those out of here. I'll even throw in Baltimore. I know your boy Gus Edwards did well for you, but they always concern me because I was getting all excited about the Mitchell, the rookie running back out of ECU. But then he only got a couple of touches. But all right, another bandwagon question. 2 running backs I'll throw out there. Jonathan Taylor, Brian Robinson Jr. So we saw a little bit more of an impact from Jonathan Taylor. Looks like he's getting back healthy, more involved in that offense. The Colts aren't necessarily winning a lot of games. They're kind of 500 up and down. But with Gardner Minshew out there, the offense is really thriving. So are you on the Jonathan Taylor bandwagon? And then we'll talk about Brian Robinson.
I am on the Jonathan Taylor bandwagon. I think this last week was the official marker of Jonathan Taylor is now the guy there, surpassing Zach Moss.
Yep.
I would not be surprised. I know Zach Moss was still involved a decent amount, but I would not be surprised if next week we only see 5 to 6 carries from him and he's not really a factor and is strictly a backup. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor is going to kill it down the stretch for you if you have him on your team. If, someone wants to trade him for some reason, I would go get him because he's certainly going to outperform what his value has been up until this point. And I think that Gardner Minshew is actually better for him than Anthony Richardson. If it was Anthony Richardson, I don't know if I'd feel the same way because he's going to steal touches around the goal line and he's not going to give the dump off throws. I mean, even though Gardner Minshew did have 2 rushing touchdowns this weekend, which was crazy, Jonathan Taylor's going to have more goal line work. He's going to be featured back. He's going to get work in the passing game on some Minshew dump-offs. So I'm more in on Jonathan Taylor now because of Gardner Minshew than I actually think I would have been going into the season.
Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, I got burned by Jonathan Taylor last year, so I did not go for him this year. But I am on the bandwagon that the rest of the way he is going to be a stud. Because he really only scratched the surface because he carried the ball 18 times for 75 yards. So he still had a good day, got in the end zone, a couple catches. That's going to increase. It really is. So I'm with you on that. And then Brian Robinson Jr., the Washington Commanders are a frustrating team across the board. But Brian Robinson Jr. has looked great, but the production really hasn't been as high as we would have liked these last few weeks. And so are you ready to jump off?
I am 100% ready to jump off
Oh, okay.
because looking at the game scripts going forward, they're playing the Eagles, they're playing the Cowboys twice, they're playing the 49ers, they're playing the Jets. These are some of the best defenses in football. And I don't know if I trust the Commanders' offensive line and Sam Howell to be able to move the ball and put up points in these games, which, if they're not doing that, a lot of Brian Robinson's production is coming off of touchdowns and red zone work because he's not really that big of a factor in the passing game. And if they are in situations where they need to throw the ball a lot to catch up, we saw this last weekend. Antonio Gibson get a bunch of snaps. Chris Rodriguez, the rookie,
Yes.
outplayed Brian Robinson. These are guys who they trust more in pass protection and in the passing game. So if it's not a situation where they're running the ball in the second half, I don't really see any value for him within the offense. And I don't think they're going to be in a lot of situations where they are running the ball much in the second half because I don't see them having really any leads against the Eagles or the Cowboys or the 49ers going forward, or even the Dolphins, who don't have a great defense. But you can't be running the ball on first and second down if you want to keep up with the Dolphins. You got to be
No.
throwing it to score points against them. So, yeah, I would jump off the Brian Robinson bandwagon right now, possibly look to trade him if someone else values him, but I don't think he's really someone that you could trust to start every week. Maybe on some lighter matchups, but he's definitely not a weekly starter.
I've been playing it as my RB2, and I've got to look for some other options. I really do. It's concerning. So, yeah, good thoughts on that. All right, let's play our favorite game. Is he legit? As we take a look at the waiver wire, some guys that had big performances this past week, and so we'll also ask the question, who is that? For a few of these guys as well. And so we begin in Seattle. And I think we may have mentioned him already this year, but he's back. He's back into the end zone. Jake Bobo.
Come on, seriously, who is that?
Jake Bobo
Come on, are
Harrison.
you going to tell me who that is?
All right, what do you think? Wide receiver filling in for DK Metcalf.
I love him, but I don't think he is legit for fantasy purposes. This reminds me a lot of the Bengals the last couple of years with Trenton Irwin, where there's just be like a random week where he catches a touchdown because, Tyler Boyd comes out for a couple snaps or T. Higgins is out for the week. And then the next week he has, one catch and is completely irrelevant. Jake Bobo is definitely a good NFL receiver. He will definitely have these moments in his career, but I do not think he is worth picking up for your fantasy lineup.
So Jerome Ford got banged up in Cleveland, and so now we're kind of scrambling. Okay, what does that mean? Kareem Hunt comes in, gets into the end zone, had a pretty good day. The Browns continue to be competitive. I don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson, but the other name to consider on the waiver wire, most likely everybody's got Kareem Hunt, but what about Pierre Strong?
Come on, seriously, who is that?
Pierre Strong, I think he's pretty much just going to be the backup in Cleveland. I mean, Kareem Hunt has not been good from a production standpoint. I think he's only averaging like 3.2 yards per carry, which is not good, but they've been giving him the ball in favor over Pierre Strong. So I don't really see that changing that much. I think if anyone were to dethrone Kareem Hunt right now in this running back room, it would be Cleveland going and making a trade for, I don't know, Derrick Henry's name has been thrown around. That's kind of crazy, but maybe even someone like Zach Moss, who we've seen been good in a backup replacement role. Maybe he comes in and he, does something in Cleveland. But I don't think Pierre Strong will be the guy to be the next great running back in Cleveland. I think it'll be Kareem Hunt just for the next couple of weeks because the coaching staff knows him, they trust him, and then it will be Jerome Ford after he's healthy again.
So Taysom Hill is one of those guys in fantasy football that you love to have on your team and even in your starting lineup on the weeks that he actually hits. Because when he hits, he puts up big numbers. And then the Saints don't use him and he disappears. And some weeks he operates as a quarterback, some now recently as a tight end, as a runner. I mean, he's so versatile. He's a wonderful weapon to have as a Saints team. But as fantasy managers, what do we do? Two recent weeks of production. What do you make of Taysom Hill?
I think he's actually worth picking up and possibly even starting as your tight end because we've seen a complete shift in these last couple of weeks in how he's been used. First 5 weeks of the season, he only had 4 receptions. And now he's had 11 receptions in the last 2 weeks. He's actually out there running routes, being used as a legitimate tight end in the offense, along with the, couple QB plays and rushing attempts that he gets every game. So if that continues, I think he is worth starting. The Saints are the most frustrating team for fantasy right
Oh,
now
no
because
kidding.
it's so obvious that Chris Olave is the best football player on that team. He's unbelievable, but they just don't give him the ball until like the ends of games. Like Michael Thomas is just getting a ton of, dump off slants and passes like he's been for his whole career. Alvin Kamara is then going to get, 8 receptions for only like 25 yards like he's been doing. Then we see Rashid Shaheed get these designed deep plays down the field. We see Taysom Hill get these plays. It's like there's too many mouths to feed, even though none of these guys are like extremely talented. This isn't like a Seattle situation where you have, three
Very
amazing
talented.
receivers like JSN, DK, or like really we're giving the ball to, Taysom Hill. Like that's just kind of crazy to me, but it's what they're doing. So it's worth talking about for fantasy.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about the Saints, so I picked up Derek Carr this week and I played him instead of Trevor Lawrence because I wasn't going to deal with the knee injury. And Lawrence ended up having one more point than Derek Carr. But the thing about Carr is he's throwing the ball 50 times. Now, I know a lot of those are dump offs, like you talked about. Kamara and Michael Thomas and even Taysom Hill are getting a lot of those dump offs, but they are throwing the ball. I think as the season goes along, there is a chance that more of those throws become touchdowns for Olave, for Derek Carr, maybe even, Taysom Hill. So I wouldn't, the Saints are a weird team. There's no getting around it. I think part of that is coaching. A big part of that is coaching. Derek Carr, you can see the frustration. And he's an emotional guy, but man, it seems like he's very frustrated there. But now we got the issue with Olave getting in trouble driving, and I don't know all the details with that, but that is definitely concerning as well. But the number that has jumped out to me the last couple of weeks, Derek Carr throwing the ball 50 times. So that there's something to be said about that. And he might be on your waiver too. I would have Derek Carr. He's a worthwhile backup. Some of these spot starts, and if things do ever get going like we think they can, that would be interesting. All right, last name. We'll throw out tight end in Buffalo. Dawson Knox is now out for a couple of weeks, and so the rookie tight end Dalton Kincaid now getting some more opportunity.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Oh yeah, you know him. He's a rookie. He's coming in. He got some hype. This past week, pretty productive. Do you like his chances the next couple of weeks with this crazy Buffalo offense that we're trying to understand?
I do like his chances a lot. He was someone who was pretty much drafted in every fantasy league as long as you weren't in like a 6-man league. If you were in a normal league, he should have been drafted.
Oh yeah.
But he was dropped in a lot of leagues because he hasn't been productive to start the season. People were surprised by how involved Dawson Knox has been and that it was a true, 1-2 timeshare between the two of them. But now with Knox out, we saw that last week from Kincaid. 14 points, 7 receptions, way more involved in the offensive game plan. And he has a legitimate opportunity these next few weeks to become the number 2 option in this offense. They've been looking for someone besides Stephon Diggs. We've seen a little bit from Gabe Davis, but he's been a letdown. We never really saw it from Dawson Knox. James Cook, while I love him, has been inconsistent in how he's been used in the passing game. Kincaid has a real opportunity to be special for the rest of the season and, be a great fantasy tight end if he can produce in the next couple of weeks and solidify himself as the guy there, number 2 option in the offense.
All right. As we continue kind of this talk about waiver wire, I think this guy's on the waiver wire, but let's do our I'm convinced. Harrison and I will each leave you with one take as we wrap things up today. And I'm convinced Cam Akers is finally going to get his opportunity because he got a little bit of opportunity on Monday Night Football. And boy, does he look better than Alexander Madison. Kevin O'Connell has to wake up, and whoever their offensive coordinator is. I think he calls the plays, but it's time to get Akers into the action even more so. And here's the cool thing. He caught passes out of the backfield and did well down the field and in space. He's just a talented player that for whatever reason the Rams gave up on, but he's one of those guys. If you go snag on the waiver wire or kind of a low key trade, the potential there is very intriguing. Because I thought Minnesota was totally done. Now yesterday gave me a little bit of hope. And if they're watching the game film, and they looked at last night and they go, yeah, Madison doesn't really do much for us. And he hasn't really done anything for us all season long. Let's try to get Akers going. Let's give him some consistent carries, some consistent catches out of the backfield, some targets out of the backfield. I'm convinced it's going to work. They're finally going to wake up. They go, yeah, we traded for this guy. This guy finished the season strong last year. He's going to finish the season strong this year. For those of us that have been patient with him all season long, hang on a little longer. It should be this week. It should be this coming week. I'm convinced of it. All right, give us one here, Harrison.
My biggest I'm convinced, which should not be surprising if you're listening to the show for the entire season or the offseason, is that George Pickens is going to be a league winner down the stretch. We lost a little bit of faith in him during the early part of the season because Pittsburgh's offense looked terrible, but now he has gone for 100 yards in back-to-back games. The offense is picking up a little bit coming out of the bye week. They maybe changed the play calling, figured some things out. Deontay Johnson is coming back now, which I think only helps Pickens because it's another threat. They can't double team him. They got to focus on Deontay Johnson as well. I think the offense is going to gain traction as the season goes on, and Pickens is going to be fantastic and, be someone who is going to be scoring 20 points on pretty much a week-to-week basis in fantasy. He's going to win you playoff games. He's going to win you the championship. If someone, has him on their bench, go trade for him. If you have him on your bench, start him. He is going to be great.
I'm with you. I agree. I like Deontay Johnson too. I was glad he was back. He had a solid game. Not the elite upside that Pickens has. So yeah, I'm with you. Pickens is the guy. So I'm thrilled to have Pickens as well. All right, Harrison, great show, great stuff. Keep things rolling, everybody, with your teams. Hopefully you're winning. I'm excited. I came off a big week, so I'm feeling good fantasy wise. Like how I've positioned some things, but here we go. It's crunch time with waiver wires and projecting the next few weeks. Look ahead, manage the bye weeks, and snag some of these guys right before they go off. That's the key. You got to get them before they go off. So told you last week about Jahmyr Gibbs. He went off. I think that will continue. This week it's Cam Akers. So we'll see how it goes. Either way, we'll have accountability and confession next week. It's also a good thing to have in your own life with some close friends and hold each other accountable as we continue to live life as fantasy managers who also follow Jesus. So as we wrap things up, as always, I'm Bryce, and I am a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. And I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. And I hope that is true for you as well. And I hope you'll join me as we live life as fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day. Go check out the raffle. Support the ministry. We appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.